Uh-oh. Motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. On the heels of her latest victory in the women's heavyweight division over Danielle Perkins, Claressa Shields, reacting to the news of the Canelo versus Skull fight in May, asked, "Who is William Skull?"
I wouldn't call asking that question malicious.
It may not have been. She may genuinely not know who William Skull is. She may have never seen him fight. Why would she? He's based out of Germany and fights under the Aegon Sports banner, a German-based promotional outfit.
Most Americans aren't going to be familiar with it.
But I did notice that a good number of people chose to lay into Claressa Shields, asking, well, who was Vanessa Joanese? Who was Danielle Perkins?
Let's not pretend that those opponents were mainstream or that the boxing community at large was in any way familiar with those fighters, because they weren't.
Addressing Claressa Shields' latest accomplishment, veteran content creator D Styles said, quote-unquote, "Shields made history, give me a break. There's 17 women in the heavyweight division."
Ouch.
He isn't wrong, though. I guess this allows us to revisit the conversation that we had leading into the fight and immediately after it. How much of an accomplishment is it to procure all the alphabet titles in a barren division where the titles themselves are easy to come by because they're manufactured and no one is holding them?
Is that really an accomplishment?
You can go undisputed 4, 5, 6, or 7 times in divisions like that because there's very little competition there.
Who's gonna stop you?
Needless to say, D Styles was not impressed with Claressa Shields' latest undisputed run because it doesn't seem like much of a run at all. A Twitter user that goes by the name I Don't Really Want to Be Here asked, so she was just supposed to be like, oh well, better not go collect these belts because it's only 17 of us?
To which D Styles responded, she can do whatever she wants like you can. I'm doing and saying what I want. I just don't think it's this historic moment in boxing. Did I say anything about her accepting the belts?
It would seem that D Styles' reaction elicited a reaction of its own. He said there's only like 17 people in the division. Unhinged response from some people. Stupid, F your grandfather, F everything you represent. You don't deserve air. You should go be deported to Gitmo, you illegal piece of shit. I hope you choke on a taco, you damn hater. He ruffled some feathers, is what he's getting at.
My thoughts.
Claressa Shields can only really fight who's there, and if a lot of people aren't there, well, that's not her fault, and there's not very much that she can do about it. At the same time, we can measure our own responses and our own reactions to what's supposed to be her latest accomplishment.
Don't jump off a cliff because she picked up all the belts in an empty weight class. Who was gonna stop her?
The whole reason people view going on an undisputed run as an accomplishment is because of the resistance, the pushback, how difficult that might be, and who you may have to go through.
The gauntlet of champions.
But there was no gauntlet of champions in the women's heavyweight division. That's not what Claressa Shields just did. So when she goes undisputed there, it's a bit disingenuous to crown her the greatest woman of all times for competing and campaigning in divisions like that. It's much easier to come by a belt at those weights because there are very few women there.
What are you even rewarding? Are you really pretending that it's difficult to come by a belt at those weights?
Well, it's not. People can see that. The question I see asked the most is, well, what's Claressa supposed to do?
Well, I'm not saying she's not doing what she's supposed to do.
I've been asked in previous instances, what can Claressa do to further legitimize her own legacy? And the most that I can think of is longevity. That after Amanda bows out from the sport of boxing and Katie jointly, then it will make a lot more sense for Claressa to be the consensus #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the sport because she is younger than they are.
They're closer to the end than she is.
Then it'll make more sense. In fairness, there are not a lot of girls with a resume like Clarissa's. There aren't. And that's why she is in my top 5 pound for pound. But the attitudes I've seen, it's almost as if you don't rate her at #1. These people act like you don't rate her at all.
That's how they act.
Nobody who knows anything about this sport, nobody who's been paying attention would say that Claressa has a better resume than Katie Taylor. That's ridiculous.
Pound for pound is about resumes?
No, pound for pound is about measuring a fighter's skill. Pound for pound. And if one fighter's quality of competition is head and shoulders above yours,
What does that say about their skills?
and that's where resume comes into it.
How the hell are you supposed to evaluate a fighter's fighting ability without evaluating who their opponents are?
I think that after Katie is gone and Amanda's gone, it'll make a lot more sense to rank Claressa as the consensus #1 pound-for-pound fighter in women's boxing, but I don't think that makes sense right now. I just don't. Not for competing in those divisions.
Elsewhere in the world of boxing, boxing insider Rick Glacier stated, "Boxing has come to Turki Alalshikh carrying the biggest stick and an even bigger bag. And so far, the only holdout is Tank Davis. And the reason isn't Tank's loyalty to Al Haymon, it's that Turki Alalshikh will make Tank fight the best. Instead of handpicked softies, Haymon allows Tank to fight. In truth, Tank's real legacy will be he never fought the best. And that's a shame."
Turki Alalshikh, as a financier, is still getting mixed reviews from some Americans. Americans like Rick Glacier like him, and I like him, but there are some who don't.
There are some people out there who don't like him.
And the reason they don't like him is the same reason we do. It's because of the ambitious matchmaking. Oh yeah, he'll pay you. He'll pay you well. Pay you great.
But it ain't gonna be for fighting stiffs and no hopers.
One of Turki Alalshikh's critics, a kid who goes by the name Pagina Blanco,
Slick Pagey, pull him.
he asked, if Turkey is so great for boxing, where is the union for the fighters? 401ks, health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, pensions. If you really care about the fighters and giving the fans as well as the fighters what they want, where is that?
Somebody ought to tell this kid how unions work. If the fighters themselves wish to unionize, they can. They can form a union and pay into it. Organize, strategize. That's up to them, not Turkey.
It's really not up to Turkey to form a union for them. That's something that they have to do themselves.
401ks.
Retirement plans. Listen, buddy, these are full-grown adults. What you do with your money and where you invest it after you earn it is up to you. This is not a daycare center. You go over there, you fight, get a lot of money. What you do with it after that is completely up to you. It's entirely up to you what your investment portfolio is going to look like.
Health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance. You understand that he's paying these guys enough that they can afford it.
That they can actually pay for it themselves with the money they're earning from boxing on his shows. But he's not their guardian ad litem.
You want he should wipe their bum too whenever they make a pull?
It's the problem with this younger generation of man-children. They think everybody's supposed to fulfill the same role as their mommy. All the stuff that he brought up is stuff that's up to you. It's up to you to do all that.
If Turkey's so great for boxing.
That rhetorical question is only giving it away that you don't pay for anything.
Anything.
The question whether or not he's been great for boxing so far, it's not enough that he put together two of the most difficult fights to put together and paid the fighters enough money that they can retire. The ambitious matchmaking you've been seeing on his shows and the price point, that's not enough? That's what gives it away that you don't pay for shit, because the card later on this month is only going to run you $25, but you'd never know it from your reaction.
You don't look at it as a plus, as a break from the customary $80 a pay-per-view costs. And you know why?
Why?
Because you don't pay for those either.
That's the smoking gun. For any American boxing fan who's gotten used to having to pay $80 per pay-per-view, they're going to look at that $25 price point as a break, a breath of fresh air for fights of this caliber. They wouldn't be asking what makes Turkey so great for boxing. For a lot of people, that by itself is enough.
But you can't see it because you don't pay for anything. That goes completely over your head.
It's a dead giveaway. And the logical fallacy with what are digital shoplifters giving product reviews. You don't even make sense.
The bane of social media. It basically gives anyone and everyone a platform even people that don't make sense.
Do you burden any other promoters in the sport of boxing with these requisites while you are virtue signaling?
There's nothing wrong with Turkey's approach to the business of boxing. What's wrong is your view of the world, your own skewed perception of how things are supposed to work.
Another one of Turki Alalshikh's critics, veteran content creator Boxing Ego, who said hashtag unpopular opinion. Riyadh season does things backwards to me. Shouldn't Terence Crawford, the smaller guy moving up, be fighting a guy like William Skull to try and secure that last belt that Canelo needs to be undisputed?
He could. I've heard that idea pitched before, but Terence doesn't want to. What do you want Turkey to do about that?
And in the process, giving us a preview of how Crawford would look at the higher weights. Is his power the same? His speed? Does he look like he poses a threat to a bigger elite fighter like Canelo? Questions somewhat answered.
Is that what you guys were saying when you were pitching the idea that Errol would beat Canelo? Because I haven't forgotten.
Plus, William Skull would be a halfway safe fight for Bud at 168 without having to fight bigger names, and he would collect the IBF title in victory.
But I didn't see anybody proposing that Errol pick up a belt at 168 when they were saying he could move up and beat Canelo. I haven't forgotten.
Then if you run Canelo versus Crawford in September, it truly would be for undisputed, instead of the bigger guy who has experience at the weight fighting Skull to become undisputed again, then giving Crawford, who would be off a 13-month layoff and moving up in weight to fight Canelo in September for undisputed? What? How is this the plan they came up with?
It's not a bad shout. It's not a bad idea. It's honestly one of the more sensible things I've ever seen Boxing Ego say. But if Terence don't want to fight in between now and September, that's on Terence. You can't force him, and neither can Turkey.
Nobody and nothing is perfect, and you guys more than everybody should understand that, because you're the same people that claim to be excited Gervonta Davis is fighting a super featherweight.
How come this logic don't apply to PBC shows? You're saying that Crawford should be fighting for a belt first at 168 to see how he looks? Why doesn't that apply to Lamont Roach?
If it bothers you that much, why aren't you making that same recommendation for Lamont Roach ahead of the Gervonta Davis fight, that maybe he should fight at lightweight and maybe he should be fighting for a belt so that we can see him at the weight before he fights Gervonta?
Rules for thee, but not for me.
Why didn't you make this recommendation when Gervonta fought Hector Luis Garcia?
Rules for thee, but not for me.
It all goes back to what I said in my previous video. The issues that they have with Turkey, it's not anything that they're saying. They're just nitpicking. They're just looking for things to complain about. Their real issue with Turkey is that he's not Al Heyman.
That's it.
And if that's the nature of your problem, you ain't gonna find a solution.
There ain't one. You end up at odds with everybody, with Eddie Hearn, with Bob Arum, Frank Warren.
And that's assuming they even pay attention to world boxing. Boxing outside of America, I happen to think they don't.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be asking what's supposed to make Turkey so good for boxing. The two undisputed fights we've seen in the last 12 months didn't involve any Americans. So do you think they care?
Not even a little. It's not a question of what Turkey's contributing to the sport of boxing. He seems to be contributing quite a bit.
The question is, what is it going to take to make these guys happy? And what you'll notice is they're not happy unless Al Heyman is in control. I have some bad news for you.
He's not in control. He hasn't been for a while, and that situation doesn't look like it's going to get better. Finally, in men's light heavyweight news, another look at the David Benavidez versus David Morell pay-per-view numbers, an article that asks, was it a success? David Benavidez and David Morell Jr.'s fight reportedly sold in between 150 to 160,000 pay-per-view buys. The fight was a World Boxing Council light heavyweight title eliminator, as Benavidez won a unanimous decision. He survived a knockdown in the 11th round to come out victorious. It was the first defeat of Morell's career, while Benavidez is now the mandatory for the winner of Better B versus Bivol. Those two boxers will fight for undisputed later on this month on the 22nd. Morell managed to hang in there before Benavidez stepped on the gas and pulled away with a decision win. Those numbers were impressive given the circumstances around the fight. It was priced at $79.95, roughly $80 if you round up, meaning that it was on the pricey end. Those numbers are solid since Benavidez is not considered a pay-per-view star, nor is Morell.
Well, this doesn't strengthen that argument.
They are both looking for their breakout win, primarily against Canelo Alvarez, but they have yet to secure that fight. The fight also did well given that it was put on PBC. PBC has not hit the heights they once had when they were with Showtime. Their deal with Amazon Prime Video has seen far fewer events being put on with the aim of establishing more quality. The boxing landscape has shifted towards Saudi, with DAZN becoming one of the leading broadcasters out there. These numbers help Benavidez potentially secure a bout with Canelo Alvarez. The Mexican monster showed that he can sell pay-per-views when he is with the right dance partner.
You stop you right there. I'd take any set of numbers leaked to the media with a pinch of salt, because it's not outside the realm of possibility that those leaking that information may embellish it, exaggerate it a bit, to make it seem more successful than it actually was.
Why would they do that?
Leverage at the negotiation table in order to negotiate a bigger purse, a bigger split, stuff like that.
But bear in mind, we're talking about a fight that neither David Benavidez or his fans think Canelo Alvarez wants. You can't negotiate the split for a fight that ain't gonna happen. You're just beating a dead horse. Twitter user that goes by the name 112 Fighting Sports is reporting an even bigger number via his sources. 160 to 175,000 buys. Do I think these two guys did that?
Absolutely not.
But that doesn't mean that intel wasn't relayed to him. That doesn't mean somebody didn't tell him that. The problem with looking at numbers like these as any kind of a success is these are the same kind of numbers they were doing on Fox. These are the same kind of numbers that they were doing on Showtime, and those relationships ended. So if you're now doing those same numbers somewhere else, you're just doing more of the same thing.
And is that really a success?
Heralding these numbers as solid without even knowing what the break-even point was, because for all we know, the pay-per-view might have just broke even.
But just above it.
We don't actually know. We're assuming they got to make a little bit more money than what they put in, than what the event costed them to put on. Though even with that, I would not call numbers like these a success, because it's these kind of numbers that saw Fox leave the sport of boxing, Showtime leave the sport of boxing. So if you're now doing these numbers on Amazon, I guess I can expect Amazon to leave the sport of boxing.
If history is any indicator of things to come.
No, I wouldn't break out the soda and potato chips, the confetti, over numbers like these. Are you really increasing your brand's value with numbers like these? How many people are you really reaching?
Before it was a choice. Now the PBC is operating out of necessity. That if they're doing pay-per-views almost exclusively now, it's because they don't have a choice. They don't have a broadcaster giving them a rights fee.
But 160,000 is 160,000.
Do you think metrics like that are appealing to broadcasters?
If they were, then Showtime and Fox would still be in boxing in bed with the PBC. I can't stress that enough, but it doesn't seem to register for some people that this is a more adult conversation than some are ready to have. The only silver lining I see, I guess, is that if David does move up the cruiserweight and he fights Zurdo Ramirez, well, he might do better numbers with Zurdo than what he just did with David Morell, because Zurdo is a bit more well-known.
He's been around a lot longer than David Morell, and he is a unified champion. This will appeal to, I think it'll appeal to, the Mexican-American boxing fan a little more than the David Morell fight, because it does feature a Mexican national.
So if you really did 160,000 with David Morell, hypothetically, you could hypothetically do 175, maybe 200,000, maybe a little more with Zurdo.
Maybe.
Unless the people leaking these figures to the media are exaggerating.
Then we don't know what the hell we're dealing with.